A number of years ago, we were called to a body dumped in the stairway of a public housing building. As we arrived, we shoved the floor mat into the door to prop it open, and this nice young guy gives us a hand and we secure the scene. The deceased has multiple mutilations about his body, slashes, stabs, and burns, even a bit of waffling, burn marks in a grid pattern, yet his clothes are bloodless. The medical examiner arrives, and the body is completely drained. The corpse is fresh, as no signs of decomposition have set in. The detectives arrive, and the investigation begins. We remove the body and resume our duties. A month later, an arrest is made. Remember that nice kid that helped us with the door? He was a friend of the victim. He and a girl had been drinking with him. An argument had started, so they beat the victim unconscious, tethered him to a chair, and proceeded to torture him for 2 days. After he died, they drained him in the tub, changed his clothes, opened the apartment door, and threw him down the stairs. In case you were wondering, there were 0 911 calls for the period of time he was being tortured. Those apartments were very close together. I would imagine 2 days of torture would make a bit of noise. My girlfriend's grandfather used to be a detective, and he tells a pretty terrifying story. When he was still pretty young, he got a call to an apartment building because a monster was trying to get into someone's apartment. The caller said that he had heard a gunshot, and then a while later, something was pounding on his door. When he opened, it was a monster standing there and trying to get into their apartment. They kicked it out and slammed the door. The caller also said that he heard more screams from down the hall, so the monster may have been trying to get to other people. When my girlfriend's grandfather got to the building, he found a man shambling around inside, covered in blood. He got the guy turned around and realized that he had found his monster. The guy had apparently attempted to commit suicide by putting a gun under his chin and firing upwards. However, he had screwed the angle up and blown up his jaw and part of his nose, but he was still alive and in extreme shock. He had been walking around the building, knocking on doors, trying to get someone to help him, but his grisly appearance had terrified everyone, so they kept slamming the door in his face, or what was left of it. My partner and I get a call for a welfare check. Ex-boyfriend calls because he received text from his ex stating that she wished it wouldn't have ended and that she could no longer go on without him. We get to the place, knock, pound, etc. No answer. We call the number provided by the ex and get an answer and a hang-up, but we hear it from the outside window and know she's in there. We say we're going to break the door down if she doesn't answer. We hear some slurred mess of speech. The door unlocks, but doesn't open. We open the door to find a young woman, wet, naked, pale as hell, and swaying in one spot. Her hands are bleeding. We call a rescue ambulance, and she's off to the hospital. Now, to the creepy part. None of the lights would turn on, so we conduct a safety search and find candles lit. In the bedroom and bathroom, on the walls, were Bible scriptures, written in what appeared to be her blood, and a tub of brown water. The water was mixed with old blood. I don't know how she survived because that water was dark. She had been sitting in it for approximately 3 to 4 hours. I hear the other guy on my beat get dispatched to a well-being check of an elderly lady. After a few minutes, the guy asks for a supervisor. A few minutes later, they dispatch me to the lady's house. I get there, and the supervisor asks me to climb in through an unsecured window at the back of the house because I'm of a smaller stature. I get to the window, and I can tell it's the bedroom. I can hear a loud television on in another room, and I can tell it's Fox News. I yell out, "Police, does anyone need help?" as I climb in through the window. I hear an old, raspy voice say, "Here." I run out of the bedroom, down the hall to where I heard the voice come from. From the living room, I see a lady lying face down in the dining room area. I call out to her, "Ma'am, did you fall? Where are you hurt?" I run over and she's not moving. I touch her hand and it's ice cold. She's dead. Been so for a few days. I unlock the door and let the supervisor and other officer in. I tell them I heard a voice and we need to check the whole house. No one else was there. I know the TV was on, but I could tell it was the news, and I heard the voice over it. My dad was a cop, so this is one of his stories. When my older brother was around 6 months old, my dad was a detective. He got a call to go to a house just around the corner from where we lived. And when he got there, he found a mother and an 8-month-old baby. The baby was screaming and crying and had a huge burn on his stomach. He took them to the hospital. On the way, he found out the mother's boyfriend had gotten mad at the baby, so we put a hot frying pan on top of it. The mother heard the screaming, but was too late. He said he'd never heard a baby cry like that before. The best part, however, was the boyfriend showing up to the hospital. He was this big tough biker looking guy, so he had this mentality that no one would cross him. Dad, being a detective, wasn't in a police uniform, so the guy didn't expect him to do anything. When the guy got close enough, he was making a scene, saying to give him his girlfriend and kid, and starting to get violent, and even hurt a nurse's wrist. My dad picked up a metal pan nearby and knocked him over the head. His head split open a bit, so it needed stitches. The doctor that treated him was the same one who helped save the baby's life. He was so mad at the guy that he didn't give him any anesthetic or painkiller while stitching him up. The guy cried and screamed, saying it was cruelty. No one cared, and no officer listened, after seeing what he had done to that baby. I was walking a beat on a solo foot post late one night. This was back in my first year on the job. My partner was on meal break, so he left me on post by myself for the next hour until he got back. I decided to walk down from the north of my post to the south, past a few abandoned lots. As I passed one of them, I thought I saw something at the end of the lot by the fence line. A lot of times, people using or just being vagrants will be in these lots. I shined my flashlight on the area, but nothing was there. I thought, a trick of the low lighting in the area, no big deal. As I turned away, the fence on the far side of the lot rattled, giving that distinctive chain sound. I stopped and looked back, already thinking of how ridiculous this feels, and put my light on there again. Standing there was a man. He didn't look homeless, nor did he look like the kind of guy that hangs out in lots late at night. I asked him what he was doing. He simply stood there, and not really looking at me, but kind of just above me. I asked again, and again, no answer. And I told him to come over here, as he shouldn't be in the lot. He just stood there. I decided to put it over the radio before approaching. Post 4, Central. Show me one male stopped at Z Street, back lot. No further, no emergency. So I walk into the lot, but have to hop a small fence to get where he's standing. I figure this guy must be tweaking out or something. He looks like he has no idea where he is. I hop the fence and look back up. And this motherfucker was gone. I took my eyes off of him for 2 seconds, and he was gone. No sound from the far fence chain, nothing. I scanned the entire lot, wondering where he went, looking behind the only real cover, a dumpster, and inside of it. And he wasn't there. Central raised me a minute later and asked the status. 1091-98. Non-crime corrected, resuming patrol. To this day, I think I saw a ghost. As crazy as that sounds, I've never told anyone about what happened. Crazy stuff. I know that there's a chance he just hopped the fence without me hearing it and took off. But in the amount of time it took me to hop a 4-foot fence, that's highly unlikely. My aunt was a police officer for something like 25 years. She saw a lot of really screwed up shit, especially when she was stationed out in the country and got called to farmer suicides. Death by farm equipment is not pretty, but the creepiest was the thing that triggered her nervous breakdown. And this happened about 10 years ago. A guy had walked into a busy restaurant in the CBD, ranting and raving and threatening to set himself on fire. By the time she got there, he'd already doused himself in petrol and was holding a lighter, threatening to spark if the cops got close. The standoff lasted for a couple of hours. Just when they thought they were going to jump on him, he set himself alight. The fire extinguisher at the place was faulty, so she pretty much had to watch this guy burn alive. Okay, so suicide calls always creep me out. Walking into a house, knowing you're going to find a body hanging somewhere is awful. This one was easily the worst. I showed up, and I was the first there. I went in, and I found the body. It was hanging in a kind of stairwell. It was a youngish woman, and the worst part, her young daughter was also in the house. And when I got there, I found the young girl playing by her mother's feet, which were dangling a couple of feet from the ground. I walked in and kind of froze in shock. I picked up the girl and took her outside. She didn't protest and happily came with me. By this time, another officer and paramedic had showed up. I left the girl with the other officer, who was a woman with kids of her own, so I assumed she would be better at talking to the girl than me. I went back inside with the paramedics, who quickly decided that this woman was definitely dead, and they couldn't do anything about it. It still makes me shiver to this day. I don't know how long exactly the woman was hanging there, but it was probably about a day. The fact that her daughter was there, playing right next to her mother's body, not a care in the world. She had no idea what was going on. It's making me miserable just writing this out. I responded to a call while in field training of people exhuming bodies and doing freaky religious shit with them. I have no clue what religion or what they were trying to do, but we got there before any body was actually disturbed. The chanting and outfits disturbed me more than any suicide or vehicle accident ever has. I wanted to arrest, but my FTO just told them to leave. He said, "If you arrest them, they get the arrest report, and then they know your name. You don't want these people to know your name." My dad became a cop back in the early 70s in a small South Carolina town. One night, he arrested a guy for something or another, and it was found out that he had a few felony warrants out. And my dad said the guy never struggled, fought, ran, or anything, and that all in all, he was a decent enough guy that basically had the "you got me" attitude about the whole thing. For some reason, my dad had to take the guy to the hospital before he was locked up, and he was just sitting on a gurney with his hands cuffed behind his back, just chit-chatting away about stuff. The guy asked my dad if he had any kids, and he replied that he had one boy, me, about 3 years old or so, but he wanted another. That's when the guy dropped the bombshell. He said, "Good, because as soon as I get out of prison, I'm going to hunt down your children, cut their abdomens open, and fuck their guts." Without thinking, my dad said he backhanded the guy with a blackjack in the face as hard as he could. He said the guy flew off the gurney backwards onto some chairs, and he heard a bone-breaking crunch. The guy was out cold for a while, and when he woke up, he started screaming about suing and how his rights had been violated. A few days later, when the state police came to investigate, the witnesses said the guy fell off the gurney and that's how he ended up getting hurt. I never did get split open and gut raped. P.S. I became a cop years later. I was sitting, monitoring a stop sign late at night, somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning. The area was notoriously known for a gruesome murder that is still gone unsolved. While sitting there, I noticed something shoot across the back of my car in my rearview mirror. As I was looking in the mirror, trying to see what was behind my car, the black shadow shot up to the driver's side of my car, and across the front. Creeped out, I realized it was time to get the fuck out of there and gunned it down the road. Our video cameras in my car are set to turn on automatically at a certain speed, so it turned on. I decided to review the camera to see if something really did cross in front of my car. During the point where it appeared something went in front of my car, the camera went completely dark, like something blocked the lens. And needless to say, I didn't monitor that stop sign anymore. I have a family member who works in narcotics in the California desert. He told me this story about the ghost car. So, he was chasing someone on a major highway. Not saying which one, but it's probably not hard to figure out. Lights and sirens and everything. The guy turns off his lights, swerves into the desert, and just disappears. He calls out for another car to help him. The tracks lead into the desert for a short while, and then suddenly disappear. They had a few officers poking around the area, but nothing ever came of it. Never found the car. Strangely enough, this isn't the first or last time this has happened. Ghost cars are apparently pretty common among the Mexican drug gangs. They've theorized that there's some kind of hidden, underground drug lair out there somewhere, but nobody's ever found anything. My best friend from high school is now a cop in Detroit. Within his first year, he had been bitten, stabbed, shot, and witnessed horrible things that could only happen in Detroit. There's one story that I will never forget he told me. He and his partner had been called out for a welfare check. 2 young boys had not shown up to school for over a week. They arrive at the boys' apartment and hear noise on the inside, but no one coherently responding to their calls. After receiving permission from headquarters, they break in and find the apartment filled with garbage and bottles of human waste. On the sofa was the mother, dead from overdose. There was a man, presumably the father, down the hall, half naked and shouting how it was the coming of Jesus and how all the sinners were going to die. It took both officers to restrain him. Searching the apartment, they eventually found the boys. Both had been locked in their shared bedroom the entire time. No food, no water, no bathroom. The younger brother suffered from exposure and dehydration. The older brother was dead and was stuffed in the mattress the younger brother had to sleep on. The younger brother now lives with the grandmother, and the dad is in prison. Fucking Detroit.